After battling at the racetrack, Superbike Smackdown 10 moves to the street to see how the same 6 superbikes perform on the open road. It's really mellow on the street. Like, the power band is not very aggressive. It really puts the power down to the tire really easily, but at the same time it kind of could use a little bit more mid-range. Like, you kind of have to rev that thing pretty high to get it to really move. And then the gearing's really tall on the street too. Like, man, like even on the freeway, like you can just ride around in second gear on the freeway. Like, it's just that's how tall the gearing is on it.
It has some grunt. It absolutely has a lot of brute power, and easing it on in the bottom sometimes on and off throttle can be much to handle, and I'm sure with some tuning that can be softened out, but I actually enjoyed riding the bike in the middle mode of the power mode instead of wide open, because it was a little bit easier and more friendly to ride through the canyons.
Ergonomics are pretty comfortable. Like, it's not that much of a stretch. Even though it's a little bit larger motorcycle dimensionally, I don't think it's that uncomfortable. And I like how you can adjust the height of the foot peg from low to high. So if you want to do track days, put them on high mode. Want to ride on the street and have a little more legroom, put it on low mode.
The suspension on it I felt was pretty good, but the overall balance of the bike kind of puts you over the front of the fork, and the stability wasn't there for me. Going through the corners on an uphill was great, but when you're going downhill and you're on flat surface, the amount of weight on the front end of the Kawasaki really made it really nervous. If the forks were raised up a little bit more, or if the shock was brought down a little bit more, I think that the bike would definitely benefit from this.
But overall, I think if you're looking for like just a really smooth and easy and well-refined motorcycle with a good electronics package and just good overall everything, Ninja ZX-10R is a pretty good bike for that.
Smooth, quiet, and deceptively fast, the Ninja is the sleeper of the group. Despite its polished demeanor, Kawasaki's peaky power band, tall gearing, and ordinary character made it the least captivating to ride, with it ranking at the tail end.
The Aprilia is just a really fun street bike to ride. It's definitely not the most comfortable. The ergonomics are a little bit cramped. It's just a real small motorcycle dimensionally, so I get worn out the fastest on that bike.
The seat sits so high that you actually feel like you're riding on top of the bike, where, you know, some of the other bikes, you're in them, you know, like the Suzuki or the Honda, like you're in the bike.
I was over the top of the bike and it was very rigid. The whole bike felt very stiff. So when I'd get into the corners and there was a little bit of, say, bumps or whatever, you'd feel all of it.
I mean, maybe for a more aggressive rider that's gonna push it into that zone, it might be good for that guy, but I mean, for me, I just wasn't feeling it.
But I really enjoy riding it just because of that thrill of that engine. Like, it's just got the most pleasing exhaust note. Like, when you're riding that thing and you're riding on the pipe, it sounds like you're riding a race bike. It's just really fun.
Without a doubt, the Aprilia hauls. I mean, it, you know, straight line, it gets up and goes. It is really amazing.
It's fast. It's really fast. It's a little bit boggy on the bottom, but once that motor comes alive, and then you'll go for a ride.
For riding that bike on the street, I wish there was a little bit of that sewing machine smooth bottom end going into the mid-range, because that would make that engine package absolutely great.
And I love that it comes standard with really good electronics, like its traction control, wheelie control, launch control, a quick shifter. For its price of right around 15 grand, like, if you want like a kind of exclusive European sport bike that hauls ass and is really kind of fun to ride and loud and a little bit obnoxious, but all in the good ways, that Aprilia is the bike you'd want to ride. If this Shootout were graded strictly on thrill factor, the rip-roaring RSV4 would be a clear winner. But soft bottom end power, overly compact ergos, and questionable fuel mileage relegate it to 5th place in this competitive group. Performance-wise, the R1 is pretty hard to beat. Like, that bike feels kind of like a race bike on the street. You know, the suspension's kind of stiff. The power kind of hits a little bit hard. I mean, not super crazy hard like the BMW, but it still kind of hits hard.
The handling definitely was of more sport handling, and it's a bike that you kind of have to be on top of more because it's ready to rip.
Right off the bottom, you crack the throttle and it just takes off. The amount of traction and how the bike puts the power to the ground, it just blows me away. From the bottom through the mid to the top, I mean, it just is super impressive.
It might be a little bit too much for someone just getting into that particular bike, but I love the sound. The motor's really smooth. I mean, all around, I love that bike.
I loved being able to play with the ECU settings because it was so easy to use. I felt like someone just stuck an iPhone 6 right in the dash, and you can go through all the parameters of wheelie control and traction control and the power output, and I think Yamaha really nailed it with how user-friendly and readable the gauges are to quickly cycle through the different parameters that it has when you want to ride it for the day.
At the end of the day, I like riding the R1. Like, I like the cross-plane crank, I like the sound it makes, I like how sporty it feels in the corners, but it is a little bit aggressive now. It just doesn't go over the bumps quite as nice as some of the other bikes. The power hits a little bit hard, and just the ergonomics. Like, it's a really racy bike now. Like, you really kind of feel hunkered down when you're in that thing, riding it. And I really applaud Yamaha at kind of raising the bar, actually just blowing the bar out of the water in the electronics department. It's definitely a cool bike. A true race bike for the street, the R1 certainly ignites the senses like nothing else in the class. But aggressive ergonomics and stiff track-oriented suspension make it less comfortable during long hauls, with the racy R1 ranking in 4th place.